So Sue Wang, a medical doctor and master of public health. She's the medical director of viral hepatitis program at the Cooperman Barnabas Medical Center in New Jersey, USA. I hope I pronounced this
Yes, you
name.
got it.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
perfect.
She is the past president of the World Hepatitis Alliance and NGO committed to viral hepatitis elimination through harnessing the power of people living with hepatitis. Dr. Wang is an internal medicine physician and has led primary care-based hepatitis B and C programs, community outreach efforts, patient-based advocacy, and community-based research initiatives. She also lives with hepatitis B, and hepatitis advocacy and patient empowerment have become an important part of her career and mission. She is a wife and a mother to 4 children between 8 and 15 years old. So it's so much going on here that I needed to read this all. So my first question is, of course, how do you manage to juggle so many life roles that you have? Is it possible to have a career and at the same time to be a good mother and a wife?
Yeah, that's the $1,000,000 question,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
A lot of
yeah, yeah.
us ask. And I think what I've learned is that we manage to do it somehow, right? When something is required of us, we step up, right? And I think as women, we're used to juggling quite a lot.
Yeah.
And it's not like at the beginning I said, oh yeah, at the beginning when I was in med school, I had no idea that I was going to get married, going to have 4 kids or have a job that required travel or do international work. Like, you don't know, right? You just take one step at a time. One door opens, you go through it, you figure it out. The next door opens, you figure it out. And then after a while, you look back and you're like, wow, how did I do that? Right. But it really is very step by step. And I think so much of it is also being willing to, ask for help, get help if you need it, and realize you're not going to do it alone. Right. So none of what we do is completely on our own. Like I have, I'm thankful I have my husband's parents help us a lot with the kids. Otherwise they come over, they basically, especially when I'm out of town, but they come over, help us with the meals. Otherwise I say like my kids wouldn't have like a home cooked meal until the weekends. And if we have to, we've hired sitters for drop offs and carpool. We carpool a lot with families around us, and it's nice because I think as you are kind of everybody's helping each other out, you create a community. So we have great neighbors, my kids' friends. I offer to carpool when I can and drive, and then they help us out, and that actually makes us tighter as a community. So, and then obviously at work too, the people that I work with, my team, they're really amazing, and we help each other. The people that you work with, you become close with, and they're like a work family also, right? And so if you kind of open up to them, and we all work together. So if I'm out for a week, then somebody else will cover, and they understand, and they'll reach out to me. Like they know I'm in a different time zone, they'll reach out to me, accordingly. So I think it's really kind of bringing in your network, and then realizing sometimes you just can't do it all, right? So sometimes you have to say no, and sometimes it's timing, right? Like I want to do this, but maybe now is not the right time. And that's hard sometimes to kind of be able to say no, but you can't do everything all the time well. And sometimes some stuff takes the front burner, and sometimes you have to push some things to the back. And so it's not juggling, and people are like, how do you juggle so many balls? Not dropping them. And I said, well, I do drop things sometimes. I tell people, if you don't hear from me in an email, like, please remind me. Sometimes I just miss things. And I don't mind people reminding me, or chasing me or following up on things. So, we're all human, right?
Yes, we are all humans. But it sounds so easy when you're saying those things. But I like that thing with opening the doors. That
Yeah.
sounds really truthful. Exactly. So,
Yeah.
but then the next thing about you is being a Hep B patient, and
Yeah.
how that affects your life.
Yeah. And so that's also been a journey. I mean, when I started medical school, it was not something I thought about at all. I mean, I got diagnosed in college, and then I went through med school kind of learning about the disease. Every once in a while I would hear something about Hep B and say, oh yeah, that's me. And at that time, there actually wasn't much treatment available at all. And I had a friend actually during med school who was treated with interferon for Hep B herself. You know, that was kind of extraordinary, but I, at that point, did not need treatment. And when I look back, I think it's amazing that it didn't affect my life more, because I've now seen many medical students have it, unfortunately, like negatively impact their experience, because I mean, people face discrimination, you know, in a lot of countries, I wouldn't have been allowed to go into medicine, or, you know, it would have been very difficult because of certain things that they require, you know, these expert review panels to review your case, where, you know, the people that grade, like the dean and people who are grading you, like, are aware of your condition. And, you know, I think that's just very difficult for students. And some people have a hard time getting residency or fellowship positions because of it. So I think, you know, when I look back, I'm grateful that it didn't affect me more. You know, I think a lot of times people are like, oh, patients, sometimes patients don't want to be patients, right? We kind of like just want to put it in the back of our mind, and we want to, you know, we just want to live the rest of our life, you know, our normal lives, right? And those of us in advocacy, I think, realize that there's something that needs to be changed. Right? You have to start off usually seeing some sort of injustice or some sort of thing that you're upset about, and you're like, we need to change this, right? And so those of us who see kind of those injustices then take it a step further and say, I'm willing to step up and talk about myself and do more for everybody else, you know, who may not want to talk about it for whatever reason. And so that's kind of what happened to me. I went through med school, did residency, and then I ended up working in New York City at a community health center in Chinatown. So there were a lot of Asian patients I had who had hepatitis B, and I did not know they didn't really teach us a lot about treating hepatitis, at least in internal medicine or pediatrics, which I trained in both. You know, it was often said, oh, you just refer to a specialist. But in our population, because it was so common, it was as common as people having hypertension. So we started basically, we're saying if we don't treat them, they're not going to make it to a specialist. A lot of them didn't have good insurance, or they just didn't have the time to see another doctor. So we started treating and created a model of primary care based care for hepatitis B, and doing advocacy. And in the city, we got the city to fund a program for screening hepatitis B. And then I started doing just kind of more talking about our program. So I would go out and present nationally about how important it is to, you know, have more attention for hepatitis. And then as I was doing more and more, and every time we would look for a patient, right? A lot of times you want a patient to be able to speak. And we would not, it would be very difficult to find anybody. You know, people did not want to come out. A lot of people were immigrants, and they don't want to show their face, you know, and they are busy. And, you know, they also just want to live their normal lives. And so after a while, it became obvious. I'm like, wow, here I am with Hep B. We can't find a patient, and I haven't said anything about it. Like, I just kind of felt like, you know, maybe it's time I share my story. And so it came out during an interview I was doing, actually. Somebody asked me, you know, why I do this. And then I just started talking about, you know, having Hep B also. And it's been very helpful, especially working with patients, because, you know, when people first hear the news for the first time, they're stunned, you know, like they're in shock. I have hepatitis. What does that mean? Am I going to die early? How does this impact my life? What do I tell my spouse, my partner, my boyfriend, my kids? They're completely overwhelmed, right? So for certain people, I will stop and say, you know, I am just like you. I live with this. You can be healthy. You can be happy. You can live a long life. Like, you know, we'll get through this. And it doesn't matter how you got it, right? Because there's also a lot of shame that can come with it at first. You know, exactly. How do I get this? And especially if, I mean, people will tell their spouses, and their house or partners will get upset and blame them. So sometimes I'll have the spouse come in or the partner come in, and we'll talk about it together. And so you see what people go through. I mean, you know, hearing people's stories, you realize it's so much of what affects a person is outside of a clinical dimension. It's not just your lab work, it's not the medicine, it's like how you live your life with this condition. And as doctors, we don't have good insight into that, right? I can't tell you how to live your life, beyond mostly the medical part. The medical part is what I deal with, but in terms of your relationships with people and how you're feeling, being hopeful and handling this, your mental health and socially, like that's so important. I think that's where patients step in. Like we help each other in that way. And that's, 90% of your life is that, right? Just living life, not in a clinical context. So that's where I think having met other patients, and I was asked to kind of look into to applying to be on the WHA board. And so initially I was the PAHO board member when you were on, and it was so great. Like just being in that room, I know we were there for board meeting governance, but just talking with each other about our life experiences, like to me, it was so therapeutic. That was like my first chance to kind of be in a peer support group, honestly. And it was, to me, that was like, everybody should experience that, right? Being in a room with other people who've been through similar experiences, telling you it's going to be okay, sharing something with each other that you can't always share with other people is just really important. So I think the work that we do in supporting patients is just, so important, really underappreciated, obviously underfunded, right? But it's really important when we talk about what, how important medicine is. It's to alleviate the suffering of disease, right?
Exactly.
There's only so much that medicine, taking a pill can do, or going to see the doctor. So much of it is like how you feel about your life and how you live your daily life, and not feeling alone, right?
But for you to because you're a doctor, so you can see, you're a doctor and you're a patient as well,
Right.
so you can see the both sides of the coin. So that I think it's very important. So, but some of us would think that your story is finished here, but it's not.
Yeah,
So,
when I learned from somebody else that like, yeah, I'm like a dual citizen. I can see both. And I think one of the things that I've wanted to do is not just have patients kind of more in the space of physicians, like in the clinical space, like in a lot of medical meetings now, there's more patient representation. And, I think a lot of times people think, oh, the patients are there to learn from the doctors, but I really think it's important to go the other way around. The doctors have a lot to learn from patients, right? And I've heard doctors say, oh, but I see patients every day. I already know what I need to know. And it's not true, because when you're in that room talking to a patient, you don't see their whole life. You only see like this much of their experience. So I think there's a lot that the providers can learn from patients too.
Totally agree with you. But shall we speak a little bit about cancer?
Yeah, so it's so I was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2020, actually 2019, and I had surgery in 2020, right before the pandemic. And so my journey there was interesting because when I was diagnosed, I went into a mode of thinking like, oh, what are my options? I need to look at the literature. What is the recommendation for me? I had DCIS, which is very early stage breast cancer. But since I was young and my mother had early stage breast cancer and my father's sister had breast cancer. So I had it from both sides. I said, well, I'm at high risk. I think, I may want to do a bilateral mastectomy to reduce my overall risk. And so, I was doing a lot of like the literature search for that. And it wasn't until the day before my surgery that it hit me that this was happening to me. Like, this wasn't just like a recommendation I was giving to a patient. It was actually, my body was going to change permanently forever. And, it hit me so late that I realized, it's very hard for doctors sometimes to feel vulnerable and like to allow themselves to really experience loss, I guess, or the fact that, that sometimes we need to experience this personally. And so, and then after surgery, all of a sudden, all the medical stuff didn't matter, right? I'd already did the intervention I was supposed to do, but then it became, how do I live with this? How do I, get up in the morning? I was in so much pain. And then I had already been kind of reaching out to patients before, and they had told me, some of their journey, but I really like started relying heavily on like, oh, how are other people doing post-op recovery and pain management? And I found an online support group called breastcancer.org. And it was like a whole nother world opened up to me, like all these people, and their online support group is so interesting because everybody who posts something, they have their, not just their name or whatever tagline, but they talk about they write down what their diagnosis is, when they were diagnosed, if they've had chemo, if they've had surgery, if they've had radiation. And so it's like an open book if they want to be. Not everybody shares, but most people will share their actual diagnosis. So then you realize they have been, you see right away their journey. Like, I've been through this much. And so all of a sudden you definitely don't feel alone. I mean, some people have been through a lot, like breast cancer recurrence. I mean, it's been a long journey, like years, right? Or some people have metastatic breast disease, breast cancer that they live with, for the rest of their life. And so much of it was very practical, like things to ask your doctor, or here at home, you should buy these kind of ice packs, or these are the kind of bras you should buy. Like, the doctor was not telling me what kind of bra to buy, right? So, but they had a whole page of like, these are the kind of bras, or like, if you had chemo, this is a store for the wigs. And I mean, not to say that the breast cancer centers are amazing. They're actually very comprehensive. And the reason breast cancer care is so comprehensive is because patients have advocated for so long that everything is covered by insurance. So they've gone to Capitol Hill, they raise money. Breast Cancer Awareness Month is like one of the biggest. It's in October. It's one of the biggest celebrated kind of health days every single year, right? And October is also Liver Cancer Awareness Month. Like, nobody ever celebrates that. Very few people celebrate. Everybody's like, no, October is pink. October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. You cannot do anything else because everything has to be pink. And so it's very unfortunate that Liver Cancer and Liver Awareness Month is the same month as our Breast Cancer Awareness Month. But you can see that the medical field has been completely transformed by what these women do. And so I was so impressed by seeing how active the breast cancer community is, right? And obviously there's no stigma, right? Nobody blames you for getting breast cancer because of something you did, some behavior you did, right? Your spouse is not going to blame you or accuse you of giving him breast cancer. Like, it's just very different from hepatitis. But the way they come together, these women, and go out there and advocate, like, they've completely transformed, because now basically everything is covered. Like, my surgeries are covered. If I need physical therapy, it's covered. The reconstruction is covered. So if you have breast implants, and even the tattoos are covered, like, it's, that's the power of, patients and advocacy.
Maybe it's time for us to learn something from other communities.
We definitely do. So after I saw that, in my mind, I was like, we need this in hepatitis. So yeah, actually, soon after, we started a website called hepbcommunity.org. And Thomas Tu, he's a scientist also living with hepatitis B in Australia. He basically started a online community forum. And so we've kind of just helped create this group. And what's nice and a little bit different is that we have experts on it. So we have physicians and some research scientists on it, along with patients. And, it's interesting. A lot of it is, I'm sure you guys see this at ELPA too. A lot of people are just like, they don't know where to go, right? So when people first get diagnosed, they're looking all over the place. So everybody has this very similar questions. What do my labs mean? What does this mean for me? Am I okay? Am I not okay? What do I need medicine? The doctor said this. I don't really understand. What can I eat? How can I be healthy? Can I date? Right?
Yeah.
When do I tell my boyfriend or girlfriend, am I infectious? I'm worried I'm going to give it to somebody. And you need a safe place for that, because you're not going to ask your doctor all those questions. So yeah, I think we're getting there. I mean, you've seen over the years, right? The hepatitis community has become much more vocal and visible. but there's still a lot of work to do, right?
But can we say that liver cancer is not represented enough?
Yeah,
in
liver
cancer
cancer,
community?
sure, definitely. Yeah. So at the World Hepatitis Summit last year, it was mostly virtual, but there was a small component that was in Geneva. And so because it was in Geneva, we were able to invite a number of the, international NGOs and organizations there. And so UICC was there, which is a international cancer organization. And they realized, they recognized that, liver cancer had not been really a focus of theirs. And because we were able to talk during that meeting, they've now agreed to kind of do more in that area. But it's true, the liver cancer community itself is not, it's starting now, right? We have different groups now for liver cancer advocacy. And I think that's important because liver cancer is, people get it, it's more tangible, right? Cancer is tangible to everybody. So yes. I think liver cancer and hepatitis really need to, come together for a stronger movement.
Wow. So can we maybe wrap up, and what would be your message to other women?
You're amazing. Whatever you're doing, wherever you are, you're amazing. I mean, every woman I meet has like such an amazing story, right? I think we wear many hats to many people all the time. And somehow we are all doing it so gracefully. And, every person, I mean, you look at me, but then I look at other people, I'm like, wow, how do you do all that? Right? How do you do it? And look, it's amazing. And you're resilient, but that doesn't mean that you don't need help, or that you need, sometimes you need to stop to take care of yourself, right? That self-care part is so important. And a lot of times what you see, especially on social media, makes it look like everybody's doing amazing things all the time. But, everybody has to like stop, recharge, and, depend on their community. And that's how we do it. And I think as women, we usually don't, I feel like we are good at finding our community and getting supported by it. And that's, I think that's why it's so great to celebrate International Women's Day, right? To come out and support each other.
Exactly. Yeah. But maybe your humble and your positive attitude is a key. So that's my understanding of everything. So dear Sue, so I want to thank you on behalf of ELPA for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
And for being so honest.
Oh, thank you. Thanks a lot. I'm so glad you invited me, and I was glad we got to work together. And I love how these things happen, right? You cross paths with somebody, and then you never know when you're going to see each other again.
Yeah.
But then you just pick up, and it's nice to be able to reconnect. So
I think you sent a very strong message. And of course, I wish everyone Happy Women's Day.
Yes, Happy Women's Day, International Women's Day to you. And I'm glad you all are celebrating it. So thank you very much, and see you soon. Hopefully. See you soon. All right.
Ciao.